I started painting during the pandemic. It quickly became an obsession. I was painting day and night until one day somebody asked me a question that I didn't have an answer to.
What is your artistic style?
Well, so I usually paint, so my artistic style is like almost 4 years in, and I didn't even know what my own artistic style was. Did I even have my own artistic style? How had I never even thought of this before? Could I even grow as an artist without some specific way for people to recognize me? The thought of it all completely consumed me. I thought maybe one day it would just call out to me. Hello? Hello? Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Nothing. I scrolled endlessly on Pinterest to see if anything stuck out to me. I watched other artists on social media just to see what their styles were, and I even went to museums to see if I would get some jolt of inspiration. But I didn't want to be influenced by someone else's style. I wanted my own. So I packed a bag and hit the road to go on a trip to find it. I thought maybe the open road would lead to an open mind and that it would call out to me. Hello? Nothing. Maybe the change of scenery in a hotel would lead to a breakthrough. I waited day and night. Hello? Nothing. Maybe just relaxing my thoughts would bring the answer. And nothing. I loaded up, got back in the car, and returned home defeated. I stopped thinking about it, and I just went back to painting and experimenting. Yeah, but you know how life goes. As soon as you stop thinking about something and wanting something, that's usually exactly when it shows up. Because one day, it did. Hello? Hello? And I realized that it's been in front of me this entire time. I've been painting with the same theme and a similar style, almost subconsciously, ever since my very first painting. We'll come back to my story around the 9-minute mark. So in this video, I'm going to tell you the real way to find your own artistic style. And at the same time, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I found mine. And before I get into this, I'm using painting as my example, but these same concepts that I'm going to go over apply to any artistic style that you may be looking for, whether that be in filmmaking or content creation or fashion design, whatever it is that you do, where you might want a tone or a look or a voice of some sort. I think there's pretty easy ways to find that. And the first one is
get your reps in.
the more you do things, the easier they become. Get your reps in. Now, I cannot stress this enough. And the reason I say that is you will likely not know enough about yourself, your taste, your preferences, the medium that you're going to choose. And by medium, I mean, in my case, acrylic, oil, watercolor, what have you, whatever niche thing that it is that you do. You haven't done it enough times to know any of that about yourself yet. And the example I'll give you here is I started as an acrylic painter in 2020. I completely learned how to paint with acrylics. Everything that I did was with acrylic paint, but it wasn't until a full year and a half later that I switched switch to oil paint. Although they're similar in concept, because obviously they're both paint, the application, the feel, the color depth, the look, everything about them in terms of the application itself is different. And I found the application style that I was comfortable with, and it completely changed the look of how I was painting, what I was painting, and what the outcome of each painting was. So it took a whole year and a half and literally over 100 paintings later until I even figured that out. But getting my reps in and playing and experimenting and painting over and over and over is what led to that switch. So I know right away we want that instant gratification for our creative pursuits, but first and foremost, you need to develop the skill at whatever it is you do. Whether you make music or clothing, you need to do that over and over and over again until you've really mastered it, the basics of it. And then you can start focusing on your tone or your voice or your look and how to separate yourself from other people. For example, I love golf, but in the beginning, I'm not worried about hitting crazy shots or scoring really well or, doing anything crazy or fancy on the golf course. I'm just trying to hit the damn ball. In the beginning, I'm trying to hit the damn ball. And then eventually you start hitting the ball better and hitting the ball better. And then you can start maybe aiming shots, and then you can start trying to get a little more rated with what you're doing out on the course. And then you can start shooting for better scores and taking it a little bit more competitively. You can't jump straight to that. In the beginning, you just need to be good at the basics. It's gonna help you be able to easily narrow in on what it is that you like and don't like. So back to my painting example, I switched to oil a year and a half in, but it wasn't until over the 3-year mark that I started having an actual theme or style or tone in my artwork. That's how long it took before I really felt like I had some specific artistic style. So again, you have to get your reps in. And number 2, in the realistic way to find your own artistic style is find themes. In your work, whether you realize it or not, there are going to be themes. And the more you get your repetitions in, the more you do something, you will be able to find themes. And for this, it's best to start with the most basic and largest themes. So back to the painting example, the larger themes would be, do I like acrylic, oil, watercolor? Do I like color paintings, black and white? Do I like large paintings? Do I like doing small paintings? Am I more into abstract? Am I more into fine art? These are large identifiers to just give you an idea of what your preferences are. These are not something that somebody else is going to identify you by. So in my case, oil, I like a combination of color, black and white. I like larger paintings and more on the fine art side. And next in the painting example, I'm going to move on to what I would consider sort of the look themes, like the subject matter. So what am I normally painting? Is it people, places, animals, In-N-Out Burger related paintings? I once did 2 In-N-Out Burger themed paintings and they were big hits, so I did prints of them and they entirely sold out. This is why it's always important to experiment. And then next would be the application. So do I prefer heavily blended looking paintings with a real soft texture, or do I like a heavier application where you can see really obvious, thicker brush strokes? But I would definitely say that people are my favorite subjects, and although switching to oil, most people like it because you can heavily blend, I still prefer sort of the heavier, obvious brush stroke, even though I've done a little bit of both, but I'm leaning towards the obvious brushstroke look. So now you got a really good idea of the overall basics. I like oil painting, I like larger paintings, I like painting people, I like doing things with a lot of color. So those are really good basics. But again, not enough to really stand out or not enough to be something where somebody could really specifically say that's your style or that's your look. The last theme that you'd be looking for are what are your identifying themes. So what are the things that stand out that somebody would be able to say, okay, that looks like your work? When you think about a lot of famous artists, they typically have a very specific look or a style or what have you. If you look at a Van Gogh painting compared to Basquiat, you can usually tell right away. And they had a specific identifying theme or application that made it really obvious who it was. So I would say, do you like art with a message? Do you like people to have to search for the meaning? Is the meaning very obvious and literal where you would look at it and know kind of right away what they're trying to say? Is it someone that likes telling stories where there's sort of a lot going on? Do you like doing portraits of people or animals? Do you like recreating images? So where you find a famous photograph or something and you kind of recreate it and paint it in your own way. So there's a lot of identifying themes to give you a real specific idea. This is actually the perfect spot to go back to my story. I realized that ever since my very first painting, I've had some pretty obvious themes in my work. I like using color to direct the viewer's attention to the most important aspect of each painting. And then I'll use black and white or grayed out areas of each painting to indicate that although they're part of the story, they are not the focal point. I like the viewer to decide why I was doing that and to interpret the message of the painting in their own way. I've always been aware I was doing this to a certain extent, but I never realized that this in and of itself was a part of my own artistic style, and that this was something I could continue exploring and developing as a part of my own brand. But now, back to my list. Okay, do you want the good news or bad news? In fact, you should always do bad news first, so let's start there. Bad news is, I don't think there's one specific way to find your artistic style. The good news is, that's a good thing. The reason I think that it's good news for all of us that there is not a specific way or one set way to find anything is part of being an artist is kind of this ongoing journey without necessarily a finish line. And it's just constantly growing and developing your craft and then finding themes within your work that you can narrow in on and then creating bodies of work based on those themes. Pablo Picasso, you've probably heard of him. The perfect example of this is how many periods Mr. Pablo Picasso had in his life. Basically, he went through different phases where the work that he was focusing on was different. He was doing different things over different periods of time. He had something called the blue period. That's 3 years where he was experimenting with different blues and greens and looks in his work. And I'm simplifying it. It's way deeper than that. But 3 full years where he focused on just one theme. Moving on, the rose period from 1905 to 1906. Cubism from 1907 to 1925. Quick math on that, that's 18 years, folks. That's a long time to focus on one specific look or theme. Moving on, analytic cubism, synthetic cubism, from neoclassicism to surrealism. The surrealism is gonna be most of what everybody is familiar with. Post-war work, etc. The really cool thing about all of this is, look, you can tell for the most part, depending on the phase he's in, that it's still the same artist. He has a specific look to him, but he's just exploring different themes or series. And I think that is the ultimate goal as an artist, is to identify what comes naturally to you, what's interesting to you, and then to expand on it. And then once you sort of exhausted that and feel like exploring something else, you do that. So the funny thing about this entire video is I didn't come into this thinking I am an expert in this topic and I want to make a video on it. This was a to-do list item of mine, which was I needed to figure out what was my artistic style. So this was more of an experiment, more of a lesson for myself than it was a video for you. But in the process of doing this, I had to ask myself all of these questions. I had to break down all of my old work. I had to try to figure out where I want to go, what stories I want to tell. I still need to make a new website. I still have like 20 paintings I need to do. I have 10 different short film ideas I need to do, merch that I want to launch. But the whole point of this is I've developed a skill over the last few years and I've been able to narrow in on what I want to do for all of those things. So yes, there's a lot of work to be done and some ironing out, to say the least, but I've reached the phase where I can identify the themes of my work and find the things that all sort of mesh well together that I think tell the story of who I am as an artist, and I have a better idea of what I want my brand to look like over the next year. So if you're in a place where you're wondering how you're going to stand out, how you want to separate yourself from others, you know, what's sort of your own look going to be, just do what I'm saying. If you're listening to me at all about anything, just do what I'm saying, which is make sure you are spending time focusing on your craft, get good at whatever it is that you do. And then once you've done enough repetitions or produced enough product or whatever it is, then start to find the themes in your work and then pick a couple to expand on and then just try to go deep into those, just like Mr. Pablo Picasso did. He spent 3 years to color blue and green. So that's dedication. So I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did, because I learned a lot about myself while making this, all based on just reflecting on those couple things. So rest assured that there is no finish line. It's a forever moving finish line. And that's the beauty of being an artist and being a creative, that you get to constantly explore and expand on ideas and have fun. And you will find your artistic styles with an S or a Z, maybe a double Z along the way. So cheers to those, cheers to you, and